the challenge has been, how do you find great people who know marketing? So several years ago, it may have been people in general who were part of the analytics function. I think analytics as a capability in many organizations is also growing up, much like the technology function grew up in the last 25 years. But now we're seeing more distinctive marketing analytics capabilities with deep skills in data science and modeling. That's the interface that we are most excited about and we see becoming standard in the industry.
Welcome to the Tearsheet podcast. I'm Zach Miller. Today's episode of Marketing Talk is all about data-driven marketing. Marketing is evolving within financial services, combining both art and science, both branding and acquisition. Data-driven marketing is a topic we hear a lot about on this show. Joining us today is Mykolas Rambus, the General Manager of Data-Driven Marketing at Equifax. His organization helps financial services clients maintain and grow deeper relationships with their customers. Myk and I talk about the challenges that still persist in data wrangling and how marketers and marketing teams have taken a giant leap when it comes to establishing data integrity. He shares insights from across the industry into how data-driven marketing is helping to drive lifetime customer value. We also get into voice marketing and the role data plays there in helping evolve that new technology. Mykolas Rambus is my guest today on the podcast.
My name is Mykolas Rambus. I'm the General Manager of Data-Driven Marketing at Equifax. Our organization here focuses on helping organizations create new and also maintain and grow relationships with consumers. So we're B2B focused. It's all about bringing data, decisions, and analytics to help our customers do even better.
Interesting. So I'm sure our audience is very familiar with Equifax, but this division, is it relatively new?
Interesting. No, it's over 35 years young, we'd like to say, compared to the years of Equifax. But we've been around for some time. A lot of folks may know us as Credit Marketing Services, or CMS. They may know IXI, the Wealth Data Network and Exchange, or they might know our digital solution segments available with various DMPs. So all of those things brought together have been part of this data-driven marketing organization at Equifax. But we like to think we're one of the best kept secrets.
And who's a typical buyer? Who's a typical client, if there is a typical?
There's a range, but typically it's the data and analytics organization, marketing analytics organization at a financial services company. Mm-hmm. We work across a range of industries, but financial services is a mainstay for us.
Okay. I would assume also there's a skew towards lenders?
That's correct, very much. And in fact, lenders, of course, know us, and so it's a natural extent for them to look at marketing solutions. Many of those same lenders know about us because of our pre-screened solutions, and they have for years. Whether it's directly with us or through our partners.
Interesting. And so one of the things I was excited to talk to you about today, were giving your view in the industry, is your sort of outlook on I guess, industry level trends. And I know you guys published something to that in the early part of this year. Can we start talking about some of those industry level trends?
Sure, we did. And as much as there's a great talk and great hope around data-driven marketing, right, applied to organizations, there's still a lot of fundamentals that have to get taken care of. The first thing we started talking about and sharing is, as we hear from our customers and look across the industry, there's still a lot of problems in data wrangling, right? Just getting the data organized. Everyone talks about the view of having a single perspective of the customer across channel. But the reality is that's quite hard from a systems perspective. And so it's beginning to get there. I think the term data-driven marketing came into vogue, so to speak, several years ago. It seems like we're just now getting to a place where both the platforms and the teams, right, that marketing organizations have been able to build are catching up.
So do you think on the organization side, I'm curious your view on the organization side, has the structure of marketing teams or analytics teams, have they evolved in a sense to be able to break down these silos?
They have to a degree. One of the hardest roles to hire for these days is data science, and that's true as Equifax or any organization. Marketing analytics as a capability certainly has evolved over a great many years, but as it increasingly lends itself to being deep in the data science and the modeling capability, it certainly has evolved. And again, the challenge has been, how do you find great people who know marketing? So several years ago, it may have been people in general who were part of the analytics function. I think analytics as a capability in many organizations is also growing up, much like the technology function grew up in the last 25 years. but now we're seeing more distinctive marketing analytics capabilities with deep skills in data science and modeling. That's the interface that we are most excited about and we see becoming standard in the industry.
That's really interesting. And so beyond data wrangling, I know one of the things you wrote about was data integrity. Can you talk about sort of what's happening in that space?
Sure. Well, so I think this is the big challenge that more marketers as well as their organizations will face as we look at some of the issues that have occurred with any number of brands. And of course, it's out there, Facebook, we can talk about how information is sourced, how do organizations come across the third-party data that enables them to most improve the outcome of their models or their campaigns. The data that feeds that is now a question, right? So we call it data provenance, but was it gotten in the right way? Was it ethically sourced, right? Can the marketing organization talk with confidence to others in the organization, whether it's their legal department or risk or compliance, around how that third-party information has been gained and placed into the models, right? Historically, certain variables are more challenging, certainly in FCRA world, whether it's age, for example, or other variables that would go into models. And that was kind of monolithic view of what can and can't go into modeling. Now the real issue is the information safe, right, to use? And we see that certainly for U.S. institutions, but for the same broad, typically financial services groups that are global, and they have challenges regarding, let's say, GDPR, and they're seeing what's happening now in terms of fines. There's a lot more reticence to be adventurous, shall we say, regarding data. So this notion of integrity around data is now, but it's going to be an even bigger issue this year and beyond.
So we've been doing a lot of coverage on Tearsheet on the data aggregation industry. And it's very interesting as we start talking to the marketers in that space. They were very careful to use the word like consumer permission data. It just impressed on me like sort of how important that's become. Do you feel like the marketing world in general is more attuned and is more sensitive to that at this point?
Very much. And certainly the organizations that have a global footprint, I think, are very well tuned into that because of what they can and can't do relative to GDPR. And of course, there's a number of potential U.S. Rules and regs, either at a state and maybe even at a federal level, that will come into play. So I think absolutely marketers are much more aware of that as an issue and beginning to think, how might they operate in a world where they have much less choice for third-party data?
And so assuming the data gets cleaner, assuming you can actually wrangle the data, that should make marketers more effective in acquisition, at least knowing their acquisition costs and whether they're doing it profitably or not. What's happening, I guess, in using this data to assess customer lifetime value?
So it's a great point that you bring up and around the sort of world of metrics, right? And so customer acquisition is sort of what people usually think about. But if you take that to its next conclusion, it is about customer lifetime value. So not just that it was cost effective to bring a customer to the organization, but now that they're here, right, what value will they drive? Most likely over the long term. It's one of the exciting things I think about Equifax and data-driven marketing is having this economic graph, right? So we as an organization are very well informed at an anonymized and aggregated level, so we can be very clear. We can talk about the details of individuals' debt or households, individuals' debt, wealth, and income. And so having that full picture really gives you a good view of customer value. So it's not anymore just about, gosh, how am I efficient at getting people through the door? It's, are these the right people, right, for the organization? And as we head toward a world of increased personalization, right, that should be really the marketers ask. And in fact, the marketers demand is, how do I get the perfect customer, right, based on the offering or service that I have today?
Can you give any examples of some of your clients that I guess are taking this to the next level?
Sure, absolutely. So, take brokerage, for example, right, where, there's still a lot of metrics as we think about both the brand as well as the agency, right? A lot of people still focus on reach and focus on acquisition. And so you can have fantastic numbers for acquisition and someone opens a brokerage account, let's say, right? And they fund it with some amount of money. But if they're inactive, right, they never really put additional assets into that account, that's basically a write-off of the acquisition. And so you're looking for people not only who will open an account, as an example, let's say in brokerage, but those who will actually go through and fund and also have the investment profile. So it's not just about the overall economic picture, but also their persona, if you will, or their cohort as to how they're going to view and engage with their investments, right? And so it all is about how can I take this to a more granular level and personalize the offer for the kind of individual that I really want to bring to the organization.
So obviously this is an iterative process, right? Bringing that first customer in and seeing how they behave, and then going out and either trying to find more people like that person or diverging from that profile. How does Equifax marketing, how do you guys help clients, I guess, achieve that?
Sure. So one of the things we're, I think, very adept at is our partnership. So yes, we have a very good economic view, right, of the individual or household at an anonymized level. But then it's all the other data that helps create a richer picture. So the good thing for marketers, right, we're in a land of extraordinary amount of insight regarding individuals. And again, I'm going to say this at the anonymized level. We can talk PII, non-PII. But there's a great level of insight that can be derived. However, as a marketer, it doesn't really make sense to have just an absolute myriad of pipes or ways information's come to the organization, right? Let other organizations who live and do that every day handle that challenge. And so one of the things that we focus very much on is our partnerships of being able to not only have our own differentiated data assets, but other third parties bring that to bear to then provide that rich picture. So that's one of the things that we do and focus on uniquely.
And what about voice marketing? I know this was, everyone got really excited about this last year, 18 months ago. We don't hear so much about, at least in the news. And I know from our perspective, we're covering it less than we did last year, say. Did it pan out the way people were expecting it to?
It's a good question. I think it depends who you ask. I think we're relatively early days in the voice marketing race, and I will call the race purposefully. The big challenge and question here is when the interaction is no longer visual, right? There's no such thing as eyeball real estate. It's about a presentment of an offer. So the personalization matters a lot, right? To not be creepy, to put forth an offer to a prospective client or an existing client. But how do you figure out preference, right? If you think about search results, yes, it may be the top 4 or 5 hits or otherwise. In voice, that's probably only going to be the top hit, right? Just one hit.
Right.
And so as marketers think about how do they engage or create activity or interest or stoke that interest over time when they've got one shot oftentimes to do so, that will be the issue. So I think it's still early days. We're still 3 to 4 years out. You can see the numbers every year growing quite substantially. But this is the big question, right? So the other analogy I'll draw is today, right? So much activity, digital marketing is via Google and Facebook. As we think about voice, also marketers will be driven through channels for those organizations that, if you will, control the voice interaction, right? Today you have Amazon in a leading position. You have other major providers who are putting forth offerings. And then you also have the traditional telcos, the Xfinities of the world, who are beginning to leverage their assets to create platforms. And so it's not yet Wild Wild West, certainly, but it's still very much evolving as to how to think about offers, right, in a single sort of presentment world, as well as who to partner with to get this story going.
I see. That makes a lot of sense. And I guess the fifth trend that you had has to do with measurement and the maturation of measurement. Can you tell us, kind of set the scene, like what's going on there in terms of analytics?
Sure. So this is holy grail kind of material, right? It always has been for marketers. I won't repeat the old adage about half the marketing budget, right? So
Right.
I think we're doing better than that, thankfully. That said, there are many organizations who are still, and marketers, CMOs particularly, who are struggling with how do they ascribe certain parts of value to the various marketing activities that they've engaged upon, right? It's one of the reasons that we acquired Datalicious, the company, and are bringing this capability to bear because we think multi-touch attribution is the right way to look, the best way to look at marketing investments and optimizing those investments over time. We're not the only ones, right? There are other organizations who are out there, but we think that's the key approach, is to figure out how do you ascribe value to the visit at the branch, let's say, or the passing of the billboard, if that's the case, or the programmatic ad, or the email campaign, and to figure out how all those not only created the journey to a given action for a prospect or a client, but also sometimes how that can be detracting as well, right? Depends who you talk to. From the consumer side, retargeting can be a bad word for some folks. How is this ad chasing me across the internet? And so marketers need to really understand what's working for them, and also what's a waste of money. And there have been several, right, I think substantial examples in industry of organizations who've cut their marketing spend substantially and had little to no impact on their acquisition or retention.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the Datalicious acquisition? I'm not familiar with that.
Sure. So Datalicious is an organization that was founded in Australia, New Zealand. We believe has the most sort of modern techniques for MTA. We're excited to buy this new growth organization that had done so well in the region, and now are bringing that capability to the U.S. market. So we started that process later last year, and have a number of clients here in the U.S. and excited to keep it growing.
And one of the things we focus on from our coverage standpoint at Tearsheet is sort of the differences and similarities between incumbent financial institutions and fintech companies that are sort of born digitally. Do you find, and maybe this is too broad a question, but do you find like the fact that like tech companies are coming in and doing acquisition with totally different skill sets, is that putting pressure on the incumbent industry to up their game as well?
I think so, certainly. As an entrepreneur myself in a past life, I think there are things that startups or growth companies do differently. The speed, their ability to adapt to industry trends extremely quickly, to take risks, right, that larger organizations can't do as readily, are very important, right, as we navigate through a continually changing ad tech and martech landscape. And certainly fintechs as well, and there's crossovers there too. So yes, it definitely puts pressure on incumbent organizations. That's why we've been focused on how do we effectively partner in the landscape. I think that also meets the needs of our clients, right? The CMOs and their organizations, who are also trying to make sense of an ever-evolving landscape, right? I think people are looking for organizations who are connected, who are plugged in, and who are bringing them sort of the newest and the best ideas, regardless of which organization that comes from.
And so, Myk, one of the things we talked about earlier in the conversation was sort of the emergence of the data-driven marketer. Are you seeing the same at the CMO level? Like, has the profile or the skill set of the CMO, your end client at the end of the day, has that evolved? Have you seen that evolve?
Not a lot, no.
Okay.
But I also think leading marketers have been data driven, right, for quite some time. So I can think of some of the more noted academic powerhouses for marketing and marketing study for CMOs. The analytics has always been part of the equation. The data science, I think, is certainly evolving as a capability within that. But the data-driven concept has been around for quite some time. I think if anything, the challenge that's evolving for marketers is to be seen as the person who has the growth ideas in the organization, right? So once upon a time, it might have been about brand. It's certainly increased to much more tactical customer acquisition, retention. But increasingly, because that intimacy, right, with the consumer is so critical, in predicting and seeing the trends and the ways that people are working, and overall, right, the macro issue of digital disruption and transformation, not for marketing, but overall to the company itself, right? And what is the nature, let's say, of a financial services company or a lender or a bank, right? And we saw this with Apple yesterday. Marketers have a skill set, a background, and an intimacy with the market where they're being asked to be innovators. And that's probably the biggest shift that we see from our marketing clients, is we are helping them or supporting their innovation initiatives on behalf of the organization overall, in some extent beyond marketing.
That's a really interesting point. So I know you can't speak about specific clients, but can you point to companies in the financial services industry that you think sort of embody this sort of new approach to marketing and innovation?
Sure. I wish I could give you names.
Okay.
There are, I mean, certainly, we all see the press releases and the other activity that's out there. But most, I'd say, are pretty vocal about it, right? When they're doing great things. I was chatting with, one of our CMOs most recently, who was sharing their approach on intense personalization. And that may have been the A/B testing now, where people are really looking at dynamic AI or sometimes machine generated creative that goes into the thousands of different types of offerings.
Mm-hmm.
That's very exciting, but there are a lot of organizations doing it. But I do think marketers are doing an increasingly good job because they have to, and because they're marketers fundamentally, right? They're able to put their own brands out there to say what they're doing on behalf of the organization. So there are very few secrets, is what I'd say.
Okay. Well, let me ask that question totally differently then.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you find when CMOs approach you with that they're struggling with within their organizations or within their industry?
Sure. So I'd say two things primarily: budgets and misaligned objectives. And I'll describe that a bit more. CEOs, right, still continue to, or CFOs, look at marketing as a place to usurp dollars when the economy goes sideways. And so marketers
as a cost center, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Marketers are constantly having to defend their budgets, right, and to make sure that they're intact so they can invest in growth initiatives. And the reality is those growth initiatives don't always yield results in quarters, right? It may take years for those things to come through on behalf of organizations. So that's a perennial challenge, right? That's why marketing measurement is the number one agenda item for marketers, because it helps them optimize their spend. It's not about cutting budget. It's about redeploying those dollars to their best purpose on behalf of the organization. So that's a major focus and a challenge I think that CMOs have in getting there.
And what about the alignment piece?
Sure. So that's around goals. So if you talk about the marketers, and this goes to the incentives question, the marketer is often aligned with a head of a given business or division who has certain objectives, right? And those objectives may or may not be aligned. So if it's around customer acquisition, and that group has to simply acquire customers, and it may not be about cost per profitable customer acquisition, right?
I see. Yeah.
So there's a lot of details in the incentives across an organization and its various functions that may not always work together, right? And oftentimes, as we hear it, and this is a little surprising, but it's not shocking based on how organizations oftentimes are either heavily matrixed or often siloed, that those metrics operate at cross purposes. And so CMOs have to navigate or basically aim to align those over time. And it just takes time, right? It takes time to get organizations on the same page as to what the right metrics are for marketing, the evolved metrics are for marketing.
So, Myk, I also saw some news hit the wire this morning. It looks pretty interesting. Can you tell the listeners about what's going on?
Sure, we're excited to do so. So this morning, Equifax and FICO announced our data decisions cloud. We're very excited to do this with a fantastic organization like FICO, because particularly from a marketing perspective, it allows the acceleration and the enhancement of how pre-screen is done. Right. So for those who live in the lending space, right, the highly regulated world of being able to extend offers of credit or otherwise attract people for lending offers, this increased set of solutions that we now have along with FICO makes that much easier, much more dynamic to put forth. So it would seem like it's all available, right? And it is in parts. Now it's all available in the cloud with speed and with ease, using tools that marketers and their organizations are already very familiar with.
Myk, it's been great talking to you. Thanks for joining us on the Tearsheet podcast.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.